Hi everyone and welcome. Today is a very exciting day here at Verified First because we are joined by Chesapeake Regional Medical Center's VP of HR, Debbie Rosenberg, to discuss defining agility for HR and TA professionals. This past year, we have spent our time having important conversations with some of America's most notable leaders in the HR and TA space. Through our HR at the Table thought leadership webinars, we've discussed the role HR and TA have in DE&I, brand, technology, talent, culture, leadership, ROI, the employee experience, and so much more. Our goal is to bring relevant and timely topics to our HR and TA community that supports you in your roles. All of these topics can be accessed through our HR at the Table resources page on our website at verifiedfirst.com. With each on-demand webinar you watch, you can earn 1 SHRM and 1 HRCI credit. You also have the option to receive credit for attending today's webinar too. If these discussions are important to you, be sure to check out our HR at the Table calendar to keep up to date on topics we're talking about. We've also worked hard to bring you a comprehensive deep dive of all the topics we've discussed through this series. So if you'd like to gather more insight, be sure to check out our blog page, also at verifiedfirst.com. Now, before we dive into today's discussion, I'd like to discuss some housekeeping items. As I mentioned, this webinar is available for 1 SHRM and 1 HRCI credit. For our live attendees looking to receive credit, be sure to stick around for our post-webinar survey. If you're listening to this on demand, check your email for instructions on how to redeem your credit. Don't worry, this webinar is being recorded so you can use it as a resource, pass it along to your coworkers, or watch it anytime you want. We would love to answer as many of your questions as we can today, so make sure you utilize those chat and question functionalities. For some practice, I'd love to hear from the audience. Use the chat or question functionality and let us know if you are a returning HR at the Table fan. If not, let us know what you are most looking forward to in today's discussion. I personally am looking forward to hearing how to define agility for HR and TA professionals. With that in mind, I'd like to kick us off by officially welcoming everyone to today's discussion. Please send a friendly hello and a warm welcome in the chat to our HR at the Table host, Ben Cornett, and Chesapeake Regional Medical Center's VP of HR, Debbie Rosenberg. Without further ado, take it away, Ben.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to our HR at the Table, episode 10. I'm Ben Cornett. I'm your host or interviewer, I guess, for the day, and really excited for today's chat as we talk about defining agility for HR and talent acquisition professionals. And we are so blessed today to be able to have a good chat with Debbie. We're going to meet Debbie in just a moment here. We talk with HR leaders from some of America's most notable companies. And one of the companies is Chesapeake Regional, a hospital organization, been through a lot in the last 2 years. And I think we're going to learn a lot from Debbie. I also do want to call out and thank Workable for our sponsor for the Defining Agility for HR and TA professionals. Thank them as a sponsor for today's webinar. We hope this is educational. And please, as we go along, post your questions in the question section of GoToWebinar. We'd love to keep everyone engaged, and we'll be watching those questions as we go. Debbie, welcome, and I know you're back up at home in Virginia. Fall colors are beautiful, probably.
They
welcome.
are.
Take a moment, introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you, Ben. My name is Debbie Rosenberg. I've been in human resources all of my career since I graduated college, and so it's something that I remember sitting in college and saying I wanted to do, and here I am many years later. I won't say how many, but still doing human resources, and there's no other place I'd rather be. Love healthcare with all of the challenges, and hopefully I can offer some nuggets today.
Yeah, we hope so, Debbie. And I think human resources since college, and I'm probably right there with you, as I've been in marketing since college, and I won't quite actually, I could say I'm still in college. I'm just finished my dissertation. So anyway, it's really interesting as we think about human resources and talent acquisition and what agility means to our audience. And we know that they're challenging times right now, right? We see it in every aspect, in every industry, in every business, specifically here in the US. Maybe you can take a moment and really define for us what does agility mean to you as a VP of HR at Chesapeake Regional?
As you said, our industry has changed quite a bit, and agility is really being able to meet candidates where they are. The workforce has changed. The attracting and hiring applicants has changed. I think everyone is feeling that in their hiring practices. And so what this means is that we are in HR are going to be uncomfortable with some of the changes because it's really deviating from some of the traditional HR and talent acquisition that we've done in the past. Prior, we've had adequate applicant pools, and so we kind of developed the processes to meet our needs, and we became very complacent. And so we do have to work at processes that are going to create a benefit workflow for the applicants. Technology is changing that, so we have lots of things that are changing in our field, and human resources and talent acquisition need to be ready to meet that.
Yeah. It definitely has changed, dramatically. I know, when we came up with the idea of our HR at the Table series, is we realized when COVID hit back in 2020 early, we started hosting coffee hours here at Verified First with HR leaders, right? Because no one knew what to do, and we all kind of got together. And my hat's off to you, Debbie, and everyone else in the field. Is, man, HR, you guys are miracle workers. But what COVID did and why we created HR at the Table is it gave you a different voice at the table, right? If you think about the executive leadership table in helping organizations drive their initiative forward, HR now has a very, very strong and prominent voice. And I'm really excited about that because you guys should have a voice because you guys do all the hard work for the company, I think. So, if you think about HR side of the house and talent acquisition side, how's agility different, or how does it look different between those two different channels, if you will?
There's absolutely a difference between HR and the talent acquisition. I look at it as the talent acquisition team is the salesperson. They're going out and they are having to make contact with folks. We're changing where we used to get those applicants and we would wait until we found a pool of applicants in order to process them through, sending them on to the manager. The manager takes a look at them, and sometimes we would have weeks, if not longer, between an applicant applying and coming to the table. Talent acquisition now needs to be much more proactive. They need to be responding to applicants within 24 hours. They need to get them in front of the hiring manager quicker because those applicants aren't staying around for very long. And so it's changed the responsiveness requirements if you're going to hire the best talent, because everyone's hiring, and so those best talented people are going to be taken very quickly. On the flip side, you have HR, and so in the past when we had applicants do an application, we asked them to put all of their information and spend a half an hour or more on an application, giving them the resume, and then we would then ask them for all of this paperwork. Well, HR is going to have to adapt to maybe we don't have as much on the front end because we need to move that process quickly, but that creates a little bit more work on the back end. So HR needs to now focus on how do we meet that applicant where they're at to get the information that we need in order to process them and get them on board. And so I think the entire process has had to be redesigned and rethought through, and that really is different than what it used to be.
Yeah, and probably different for every industry a little bit too. I think, across the board, we know that there's what we're going to call a war on talent. There's talent out there and everyone's trying to get the people they want, right? And when you think about agility, we're really talking about the ability to talk to a candidate that's qualified, move them through a process in a timely manner so they're not getting taken up by other offers coming at them as well. And how does someone like Chesapeake Bay, maybe in your organization, where you're not only in an industry that is very critical to our society, healthcare has been a challenge. I think across the board in every state, healthcare workers are exhausted. They're looking at other industries, other fields to go into. I mean, how do you apply agility to your own organization trying to deal with healthcare hiring?
I think that we have seen more retirements and more resignations of people just getting out of the industry than I've ever seen in my career. And not just the nurses, which we've had a shortage for a long time, but my highest turnover is in my entry-level positions in dietary and housekeeping, in those entry-level beginning individuals, and they're turning over faster, particularly because there are so many options for them to go to, and it's been a tough year, year and a half for folks. So for us, it's really how do we take care of our employees, so that retention initiative. But then when you're talking about the talent of how do we focus and get them on board? How do we be the first to make the offer? How do we make sure that they feel special? How are we staying in constant contact and making sure that we're meeting their needs? And I think that that's where you're going to win the war on talent, is if you can get to that interview, get to that candidate, but once the talent acquisition team pulls them in and reels them in, that handoff is really important. How fast are we getting to them from the time of the offer to the time of onboarding? How easy are we making our orientation processes? Are we making it onerous? Those are things that if we miss that handoff, we are putting in jeopardy the person we just got on board or that just accepted an offer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. Would you say, Debbie, and I know this is maybe a weird question, you can say, I don't know, that's always okay. Would you say that the kind of the collaboration between HR and talent acquisition has improved as a result of, this need for us to be more, I don't know, more agile in the process? Has it improved, or has it gotten worse?
I think it gets more complicated. I think we're moving so fast that you may miss pieces of information. And so I think that that's where you really need to tighten the processes to know who is doing what. What is the recruiter going to do? What is the HR person going to follow up with? And so we've had those internal struggles just like anyone else of identifying who's going to do what. And so really having some clear definitions around what are the pieces that have to be completed before the recruiter passes it on to the next person in that processing hire, and what is that candidate expecting, and how do you set up that expectation for that next step? And I think that those are, kind of those connections that sometimes get lost of everyone's excited to make an offer and accept the position, but what's next? And how do we handhold them through that onboarding piece of it to make them committed to the organization to get through the 30 days?
Yeah, I know we talked a little bit about like technology, and how technology is changing and shifting. And, I think I've heard a lot of organizations, these past episodes we've done, that they've actually rethinking their technology solution to be able to address some of those challenges with the power of technology and AI and other things we've talked about previously. So if you think about like the influence on, how being agile and fast that you talked about and trying to define who does what, what kind of impact when you get it right do you see that you guys have had success on in fighting this war against lack of talent?
When you get it right, people are excited. They come in for their first day and they're prepared and they're ready and they have their paperwork done. They have the opportunity to be introduced into their job and settle into the job, knowing that what was said to them in the interview followed through in the HR process, followed through in the orientation. And so setting that expectation, having some constant contact, having that person who is going to help them get through that process is really key. One of the positions that we created was an onboarding specialist. And that person's job, they don't have any physical work that they do. All of their work is about contact. It's through group me texting. It's through following up with the candidates pre-boarding, onboarding, and post getting on board to make sure those questions are answered. And so the entire job is that social impact of engaging the individual so that they feel, welcomed and warm, and, that they matter, that they're not just a applicant that we're pushing through, that they are a person within the organization. And so I think that technology is great. The texting, the phone calls, the emails, but that personal touch of somebody who's talking to them before they get to the organization, making sure that they know where to go, greeting them when they're here, and then following them through, particularly through that first 6 months, with all of the questions that you have when you engage with a new employer.
Yeah, that's really good. It makes me think about, and this might sound weird, but it makes me think like I should have a ringtone for that person that you just hired or created this position, and it's got that song, "You've Got a Friend in Me." You kind of have a friend in the organization too, right? That's really, really interesting. There's obviously a lot of challenges. We got a question from the audience that I'm going to drop in here, and we'll try to answer it. And I like the audience questions. So this one came from Pierline. I hope I said that right. The question's about vaccination mandates. It says, how do you deal with vaccination mandates for healthcare workers like personal care assistants? Any comments or suggestions for Pierline? And if we don't really have one, we can address it afterwards. But I thought that was a good, relevant question, especially trying to get some insight from someone like Debbie.
In healthcare, we do have a requirement that you are vaccinated unless you have the 2 exemptions, which are the medical and the religious exemption. And so you do need to be aware of what your state requirements are, how they view those types of exemptions. It is different from state to state. You are seeing things that are happening in the different states. So my recommendation is to make sure that you are compliant with your state regulations and your state requirements. For us, we made sure that we made the clinics very accessible to employees. We did lots of, on-site through our occupational health department, and making sure that it was easy for folks to access the shots that they were wanting to take, whether it be Moderna, Pfizer, or the Johnson & Johnson. So we made sure that it was very easy for folks to be vaccinated if that was their choice. We had a nurse practitioner that was willing to talk with them about the impact and the questions that a lot of folks had around it. So we made sure that they had resources. We made sure we had the resources to answer a lot of the questions, the frequently asked questions around it. But at the end of the day, people had to make a choice of what they want. And then we did have, as I said, the religious and medical exemptions in the state. So we recognized anyone who had an honestly held belief for those exemptions. So, again, I caution folks, make sure you're following your state mandates, because it is different by state. But a lot of it is education and fear, and getting folks to understand, how do we take care of our patient population who is very vulnerable. Yeah. For those that have exemptions, they have some very strict guidelines of mask wearing. They have to wear their face shields, and we identify on our badges, who is vaccinated, and if somebody had an exemption, they have they're identified that way, so we know that they need to wear their proper PPE.
Yeah, that's really good, and that is a hard question I think we're against. And then when you think about, thinking about adopting a hiring strategy, which we're kind of talking about, and having an agile hiring strategy, do you guys, I don't know, can you ask that question in the talent acquisition phase when you're trying to recruit people and say, hey, we're an organization that you can have these exemptions, but we require vaccination if not? How do you guys address that?
We address it on the application. Within the application, we have had flu mandates for many years within healthcare, and so it's included in that as a vaccination status. Just like we identify that we don't hire nicotine users, you notify them ahead of time what the process is and what the expectations are in order to onboard. And so we clearly identify that people are eligible for their exemptions. So it's not that you have to have the vaccination, you have the vaccination or the exemption. And so then they can apply, but we do give the notice that it is a requirement for our organization.
Yeah, definitely a touchy topic, in our society today is, many of our families probably deal with that. And, one of those things, I think the most important thing, you chatted a little bit about this right before we jumped on the webinar here, Debbie, is we need to have a little bit more respect one for another. You can't get out of your car driving down the road and start yelling at people or do stupid stuff because you're just stressed because all this vaccination, non-vaccination. The important thing is treat people like people.
It's kindness. Anyway, I mean, I think that does come into this agility, and it does come into the discussion of, as an organization and you're going through this process, people are dealing with this in many different ways, and we're going to be dealing with this from a sense in the long haul. So how are we helping our applicants? How are we helping our employees manage that stress of what this has caused and get away from this two-tier pieces? We are all one. We are here to care for humankind. And so can we approach it with kindness? How do we approach our applicants? It needs to be with empathy and kindness and understanding. And I think that we need to get a lot more of that back in society.
Yeah. It's kind of hidden a lot of people away from their normal day to day. And it's good to be able to, once in a while, at least in Idaho, we don't have mask mandates right now. I get a smile to people, and I get to see their smiles. And, the nice thing in webinars, we get to see smiles, but, it's still not as the same as actually being able to be super close to someone. Well, I want to kind of build on this proactive adaptive hiring strategy. And, where do you think agility is really important in the strategy when it comes to talent acquisition and management?
I think the agility that organizations are going to have to strive for is that first contact, where instead of waiting for applicant pools being the first to contact applicants as they come in, my staff are expected within 24 hours, Monday through Friday. On Mondays, they're very busy, is to contact every applicant. And so sometimes that means you read through their information. They're not qualified, but they need some sort of notice that says that they're not qualified. And so it's that touch, because even if they're not qualified for that position, how you treat them in that initial contact either speaks well for your organization or it doesn't. And so if anybody's applied for a job recently and you wait weeks to get any type of a response, if you get a response at all, you know what that feels like. And so particularly for qualified candidates, nursing, I expect a call within 24 hours. Some of the other positions, it might be 48 to 72, depending on volumes of what we have. But I'm looking for our talent acquisition team to at least make a first contact. It doesn't mean they have to do a full interview, but they do have to have some sort of contact, and not just the automated email response. Is it a text? Is it a phone call? Is it something that communicates to them that their application has actually been seen? And so I think that that's the first approach on this war for talent.
Yeah, I like that you have a strategy where you kind of put the, I don't know, with lack of a better term, the onboarding specialist or buddy system, or I need a friend, right? Because if you just depend on email, I don't know if everyone can see that. I've got 7,383 emails in my inbox. So if you're depending first contact to send me an email, it ain't gonna work, right? And so I really like that you have a strategy to address that. How does HR and TA determine agility for your, how do you determine what that looks like? Or, what are some tips you can give to someone that's looking at these issues and being able to contact their applicants and move them through that process quickly?
I think it comes down to having that process flow. I loved one of the slides where you had all the sticky notes on a board with different pieces. I think that HR and your talent acquisition team need to really sit down. That's the one to really map out the process and where are the pain points for the organization, for the candidate. You have to be looking at it from a candidate perspective. And so then you start to get that accountability and commitment of, okay, in the morning, we are going to carve time out on the on your calendar that says, this is your time for contacting candidates. And so it becomes a very planned and conscious and targeted expectation for those folks that are supposed to be reaching out to candidates. And if they get behind, they need to be able to raise their hand and say, I need help. And who else can help in that capacity? And so, I think it's really getting together and saying, what are the steps necessary from the time the applicant hits that button and says, I've applied, to what are the steps after that, to the interview, to the acceptance of a job, to how they come into the organization. So it's really mapping it, and it's being very conscious and thoughtful of that process. And I think that that's where each team has to create their own unique expectation of what that is as a candidate comes in.
Yeah. Now I know you've got friends in HR because that's how HR works. Do you think most organizations have kind of already went through this? You know, most organizations, if you look back year and a half, 2 years, they had very rigid hiring strategy, right? And it wasn't really flexible. It's like I go through step A, B, C, D. Do you think if you look back that most organizations today have reformed that? And if so, did they structure it in a way that agility can be attained? Think of your peers, right?
You know, I don't think so. I think that we have a lot of folks that have, you know, this is the process. It is the applicant to jump through these hoops. It's the applicant that, you know, we hold the job and we're granting a job. And so I think that that's the differentiator between organizations right now of if you are agile and you are meeting the candidates where they're at, does that mean that you're recruiting into the evening? We shifted hours so that some people are that late evening call, because guess what? You're working during the day, you don't feel that you can have that phone call, but to talk to somebody at 7 o'clock at night or on Saturday or on Sunday, we have recruiters that do that understand that we have to meet those candidates where they're at. For those organizations that are Monday through Friday, it's got to happen between our work hours of, you know, 8 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. and we're not going to go outside of those hours. They're losing. And you know, we've had some of our largest orientations these last few orientations over the last couple months, but we've been getting better and better at it as we apply these approaches.
Yeah, that's really interesting that, you know, I kind of, in my mind, I was like, yeah, they probably all reform, but the reality is you're probably right. That most, you know, the candidate really wants a job with my organization, they're going to do what they need to do, right? And the reality is there's so many options out there for candidates that you have to be a little flexible and really restructure that. How does an organization, you know, ensure that, you know, organizational cultures that have built over years, right, and theories and practices, how do you guys make sure that those are included in the new agile strategy of, you know, adaptive hiring?
It's got to be conscious. You have to be conscious of those things that are important to your organization. And when you're developing the strategies that you are going to use, when you start, you know, putting those sticky notes out in that process of each individual thing that has to occur in order to bring somebody on the board, where are you making sure that you have had those discussions of what the expectations are with your organization? And the more that you can do that before the person actually starts, the more likely they're going to make it beyond the 30 days. And I think we've all had these folks that are ghosting us, or the folks that are, you know, they come in for 4 days and they leave. And so that's really where we started to focus on that first year orientation of how do you get them in the door but make them belong? How do you create an environment where they're saying, this is the organization I'm connected to, and I like what I see. I have connected, and now I want to stay. And so I think that that's where you need to make sure that it's conscious. You need to make sure that you have built it into the process, whether it be through videos, whether it be through, you know, questions that they answer during the applicant process. So we actually have a guide that our leaders use as part of this is the expectation around our culture. And so, that will be unique for every organization. You have to build your own because you don't want to just adapt somebody else's. You really should be talking to your executive team of what they expect for that culture and building that into the process very consciously.
Yeah, it's really interesting, you know, because I actually wrote that down on my note here, is connection is everything. And, you know, you talked about having this onboarding specialist, and the reality is, I mean, I think you're right, Debbie, that, you know, and I haven't looked at all the science behind this, so I can't claim, you know, this is scientifically accurate, but I think you're right that every organization I've worked for, at least, if I'm connected to their mission, their values, and I'm engaged by people that care about me as a person, I'm more excited, right? And I see that even on my team here at Verified First. You know, I'm connected to my team. I love every person on my team. We take care of them. In fact, we have little massages going on tomorrow. So, you know, those kind of things I think are really, really important. They go a long ways, but really being able to connect to what your company stands about is more important. And, you know, I noted that because sometimes we let that go. We take that for granted, right? It's really, really important. We talked a little bit
Well,
about
and
this on.
I'm going to add, but even with COVID, I think people want to be connected even more. They've lost that connectedness because of all of the isolation that was created around this. And so people are looking for a sense of community. People are looking for a sense of purpose. And how do you connect those two with your organization to give them that community and that support? Because quite frankly, a lot of people need a lot of support. This has been really tough, whether it be, how they take care of their kids, how they take care of their parents. They've lost those connections. And so I think it's even more important now as an employer that we are helping them have that sense of normalcy and connection. And I think that if you can provide that, that's going to be a very attractive model.
Yeah, that's true. I was just going to ask, at Chesapeake Regional, most of your staff is probably in person still. You probably have some staff that maybe work remote. I don't know, but there's a lot of organizations that are still fully remote, like Verified First is one. We're about 120 employees and we're fully remote. And so I don't get chit chat with my neighbor, and we try to do things. We do virtual game parties and things to make that fun, and that's been topics of past HR at the tables. Am I right to assume that most of your people are still in person? You guys still get to see each other and have lunches together and, can still socialize?
We do have our social distancing requirements, and we only allow so many people in break rooms and those types of things, but we're doing more and more. We saw a lot more people eat outside. We created spaces for folks to be able to sit at tables outside, to be able to engage in a more open area. And so I think that, it's that consciousness of how do you address those things. We did our picnic under a tent in an open area so that we could still socialize, have that social distancing in that type of area. So I think that connectedness really is where people are looking for and what you have to meet. And so we have to figure out a way in order to create that sense of belonging.
Yeah. Have you guys already thought about the winter coming to Virginia? Or your eating outside spaces got like space heaters or something?
There are tents out there that you can do the space heaters in that give you that more openness feel. We are looking at more, how do you do it in smaller groups? So instead of, 100 people in an area, you're only doing, 40 people in an area, but you move them through. Our breakfast with Santa is one of those examples of, we like to do that for our staff and their employees. We have, one of our doctors that likes to dress up as Santa. And so, how do we do that in that more responsible way? And so a lot of thought and a lot of energy has to go into creating those spaces that you can still engage just in a different way. So it requires work and thought process in it.
Very intentional,
very intentional.
Not something you do passive, that's for sure. Well, we got another question here, and then we'll go on to a quick audience poll. So questions from Julie. Julie, thank you for your question. And Julie's looking for ideas. It says, what do you recommend as a low, no-cost incentive to help retain employees? And then she continues, our management team is hesitant to increase wages or benefits. So any brainstorm ideas? We see this question actually often. Love to see what you have as ideas.
So one of the things that we created within our organization, they're called 15 and Me rooms. And so it was carving out a space on multiple areas through the organization that give our staff an opportunity to decompress and relax. Low music, aromatherapy, it's like a no noise area that is part of the day to really let folks take a moment and take a breath and be able to relax for a few minutes. And so I think that that's going to be one of the areas, because we're talking about a lot of mental health that's happening throughout the country. And so how do you help your folks with that mental health? We are doing a little bit more around wellness. And so actually yesterday was our Halloween hoot, where we have outdoor games for the families and the staff members to be able to take a moment away from their job in order to just have that moment of joy and be able to participate as a group for their own wellness. And so we're looking at a lot of different options around the wellness piece. Low cost option, we implemented FitBum, which is a wellness-based app that gives challenges on a regular basis for physical, mental wellness, financial wellness, and it's not very expensive. It's run through our wellness department, and we have a team from multiple departments that come together that help us curate what we're going to do for that. And
what's
so
the name
I
of the
think
app?
that it's
I gotta ask. Name of the app is FitPhone.
FitThumb, yes, FITTHUMB. And it's an app that they have, and it's not very expensive, but it's a wellness app in order to engage folks in their own personal wellness and challenges. And some of them are really extreme challenges, which some people get enjoyment out of, and then they have the easier challenges that then can engage everyone within the organization if they want to.
Yeah, I think the thing maybe to Julie is I don't think that all employees just want more money or better benefits. I think they want that belonging that we talked about a little bit, right? And that community sense. I know at Verified First, we do what we call Office Olympics. And our first ever Office Olympics this year was remote. And it was kind of fun because my oldest daughter, she's 24, and we had this fruit, what they call those fruit roll-ups. They're like 3 feet long and you have to eat it without touching it with your hands. And my daughter and I did it side by side. It's on TikTok. You can go watch it. But nonetheless, I think those kind of things help us connect. And it doesn't have to be super complicated or super expensive. So Julie, good question. Hopefully we answered your question, and other people have ideas and they can chat them up to us as well.
I'll share a couple more that I think are really fun. One is we didn't do it this year, but a pet costume where people can dress their pets up in costumes and you share, because a lot of people are connected with their pets. This year we did the pumpkin decorating. They can't carve it, but they could draw on it. And so it adds an element of fun within the grouping, and it brings teams together to come up with concept, idea, and then sharing and judging and all of that. And the prizes aren't big. The prizes are, very nominal. It might be dessert in our cafeteria, or it could be, small things. But it's really getting people engaged outside of the work itself to have fun in that connectedness.
Yeah, we all like fun. That's important. Just to change gears just a little bit, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that HR-TA alignment in just a minute. We've been doing a year-long survey, so I'm going to launch a poll here to our audience and reminding everyone you can engage with us in our chat. We will be sending a recording of this webinar. I saw a question about that. But this poll is really connected to what we talked about. How do we use technology to help make the process more agile, right? And so I'm going to launch this poll. The question on the poll is, what areas of technology are you looking to replace within the next year? And you can select one or more of the following: applicant tracking system, CRM, background screening, assessments, or no replacements. We've been doing this for a year, so we're looking forward to 2022 coming up. We're going to release our annual State of Talent Acquisition Buyer's Guide that we produce every year. This will be the third year in a row. So take just a few moments, participate in the poll. We've got a little over 130 people listening in, and about 30% participated. So we'll give this just a few moments here, Debbie. At Chesapeake Regional, when COVID and everything happened, did you guys do anything when it came to your HR technology, or did it stay the same?
We did add some technology, particularly around video interviewing. I think that was the big one that a lot of people participated in, is getting the webcams and getting the participation of being able to interact over the internet. So I think that was the biggest piece of technology that was introduced. As far as our other pieces, kind of put things on hold. We had so many other things that where our focus had to be drawn to, that was just, the implementation of new products was just really tough.
Yeah, definitely. It's been interesting to see what organizations are doing. Just a quick share of the results, and we'll get back to our presentation here, but looks like 34% are looking at their applicant tracking solution systems. Kind of interesting. So a third of everyone. And then assessments is a big number, 26%. But to your point, Debbie, 41% in the next year aren't looking really to change any of their HR technology. So a majority, right? Good stuff. Well, Debbie, this has been really good. We're gonna continue to chat a little bit about the alignment and getting HR and TA to align, because it's really about that candidate experience. It's probably been 2.5 years when we first started to see SMS technology come into the applicant process, trying to meet candidates where they live on their phones. That's maybe an example of how to align with the candidate experience. And, HR and TA really have to make sure everyone knows what they own, right? And it's a fluid experience. What does it mean in your mind when your HR team and your talent acquisition people are all aligned?
It's that handoff. It's really that process by which you have the salesperson and the onboarding person, the tech people who get the mechanics underway. And so I think that that's really where you have to be aligned and you have to be able to follow through, and that requires a lot of communication. It requires everyone stepping up and doing what they're expected to do from the time the applicant enters the system. And so I think that the most anxious time that an applicant has is between sending their application and getting that interview and offer. But the second most, or after that piece of it, once they get an offer, it's like, okay, I got an offer, now what? And so that's where the HR team really needs to step up and say, okay, they're anxious, they just accepted the offer, let's capitalize on that excitement, and how are we going to get them from that void back into the organization, and so that they start to belong even before they come on board. And so that's where they really have to be aligned, so that there's not this dropping of the ball of an offer, and then a week later somebody calls and says, oh, by the way, I need all of this paperwork. It really needs to seem seamless in that process. And so that contact has to be deliberate.
Yeah, that's really, really important, and I don't know, I'm assuming here because I've worked close enough with healthcare to know that usually there's an orientation for employees, and usually they start as kind of like a cohort. Is that still the case for healthcare, or is that shifted to where we want to get the people in quicker and the cohorts are smaller, or they're more, let's start every week kind of thing? What does that look like? Has that changed?
So it has changed. We used to do orientation every 2 weeks. It was Monday and Tuesday, and then you had your clinical the following, Wednesday, Thursday. So it was a week-long orientation for many of the folks. And so we went with a blended approach where we do a lot of the things that we used to do in person are now on online learning, so that they can get the mandatories out of the way, and then we have some things that are in person, and then we go into the technical training. But we do now allow, we never used to, we now allow people to start on any off orientation week. They just need to come back into the orientation the following week. So we are onboarding people quicker as a result of what we are seeing in trying to get them as quickly as possible into the system.
Yeah. Do you think that talent that, obviously TAs handed them over to HR, you can get them in sooner than what you have in the past? Do you think talent is becoming stickier because of that? Or is it just too early to tell, like long-term retention?
I think that the first year turnover is going to tell the answer to that. I think that we are, at least our organization is really focused on first year turnover and what that looks like. And so that comes back to that experience of what was their experience of applying, what was their experience for getting on board, what was their orientation experience. So I think that is where we need to focus our energy to make sure that we have the right person and that anybody along the line can stop the process. And what I mean by that is you do the interview and you've hired the person for their technical expertise. But if they come in and they're rude to the HR person, the HR person needs to be able to say, hey, I just spoke to candidate C, and what they said or how they reacted to me or how they treated us was not really part of our culture. And so I think that that's a second component, that as we move faster on the first side, we have to be able to have that that ability to have everyone have input along the line.
Yeah, really empower the staff along the way. That's important. That might talk to some of the pitfalls. Are there other pitfalls or possible pitfalls that could affect this alignment between HR and TA?
Really it comes down to that communication. That's the biggest pitfall that you have. clearly defining who is responsible for what in the process and making sure that it's seamless. And so I think that that's really a key. That's the pitfall that can happen here. We're moving so fast that we don't get all the things that we need. And so it really does come down to a trust between the recruiter and the HR person that each are doing their job in order to get that person in the door. And you have to clearly define what those responsibilities and expectations are. Otherwise, it's going to be disorganized, and the candidate's going to feel like they didn't matter. And you don't want that to happen. So you really do need to have that clear communication. And I think that's the biggest pitfall when you're doing that handoff.
Yeah, that's really good that you mentioned that. And I think if you add to that a little bit, the idea of this handoff, having that person that's extra in that process, kind of, again, you get that buddy going, right? It's like someone I know, someone I can relate with, someone that knows me. That's a really intriguing change, I think.
And I think one of the unique things about that is she does each cohort in a group me, so they all get the same text. So if one person from their grouping has a question, they all get the answer. And so we keep them in this cohort in a text me or group me, so that they can ask questions because they're all onboarding at the same time. So if one person has a question, maybe somebody else has the question.
Yeah.
And so that's another layer of communication, even if not everyone had that question.
Yeah, super smart. Another tip of the hat to you in HR. You guys innovate in a way that's quick and meets the candidates where you need to meet them. So that's super impressive. There's a question that we talked a little bit about, like a talent acquisition lifestyle, right? Mm-hmm. And what can you talk to us a little bit about what, if we think about talent acquisition lifestyle as an organization, what does that look like?
The lifestyle is really understanding that it's not an 8 to 5 job. This is really something that there are those peaks and valleys as you're hiring and getting folks on board in order to have a smooth process. And I talked earlier about sometimes you have to interview on Saturdays and Sundays, or sometimes you have to work late in order to get those appointments in for them to get their paperwork signed. People have kids to pick up, they have the work that they're currently doing. And so if you are saying you can only come into our office between 8 and 5, some people are going to say, you know what, I just can't pull that off because of various other things. And so they might overlook your opportunity. So we have some flexible evening hours. We have different pieces that we make it easier for our candidates. And I think that that's part of that alignment, if you will, and that lifestyle is to say, this isn't an 8 to 5 job anymore. It's not an office. It's not truly just an office. We're working from home. We're doing those contacts in a different way. And I think that that's a different change and a different lifestyle than we used to have in human resources.
Yeah, that's interesting. Somehow get that across the organization, even up to the executives, right? That they understand they live a lifestyle of talent acquisition, especially in today's environment. It's really interesting you mentioned that. I'm very happy with the Verified First, but I can tell you, if someone was trying to recruit me from my normal business hours, which are like 7 in the morning to 6 at night, typically, they're not gonna talk to me. And that's kind of interesting that you guys are doing that a little bit different.
I think you find a lot of people that just don't feel like they can talk openly or have those conversations, and so therefore we have to be flexible for them.
Yeah, I remember we've talked to a few candidates that we get in the door, and then it's like, well, I can't meet because I'm working, right? I got one guy in mind, very vivid, right? He's on paternity leave, and we were looking for him as a role, and it's like, yeah, I can meet with you at some other time. And we called him on a Saturday and chatted with him on a Saturday, and not our normal mojo. Yeah, not normally what we do. It's really good feedback. We get another question, and then this one is from Sharon, and she's in New York. Hi, Sharon. Thanks for the question. Her question: I own a cleaning service in New York and having a problem with candidates showing up for their Zoom interviews and phone interviews. And this is probably a smaller organization, I'm assuming, Sharon, but any tips, maybe what she should change about the process to get people to show up? Any insight or anything you guys have done because you've encountered that issue?
So we have found that the longer you wait between the application when they're excited to apply and trying to get the interview is going to impact that ghosting piece of it most frequently. Now, you do have candidates that are just applying for their unemployment, and so they're not even leaving right numbers or right contact information. But because of the nature of what we're finding, particularly for our entry-level positions, if somebody applies today and you wait a week to contact them, you are less likely to get a hold of them because they've probably already accepted a job somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so, if that's the issue, a lot of times it's that they've already interviewed with somebody, they've accepted a job, so why bother showing up for the interview? And so my recommendation there is go back to that contact within 24 hours, having that interview as quickly as possible. And I know that's inconvenient for managers. I know it's inconvenient for HR, but really, the longer you wait, that candidate's going to be gone.
Yeah, it's a good question, Sharon. And it's kind of interesting, Debbie, your answer kind of reminds me, because I'm in marketing and we work with marketing and sales very, very close, right? And it's,
right.
There's actually data out there that shows 5 minutes from someone filling out a form to getting a phone call, your likelihood of closing the deal or winning the business goes up like 97%, very, very high, right? So it's almost kind of the same philosophy as what you're saying. So Sharon, hopefully that answers your question or helped answer. Is hopefully they apply and you want to talk to them, you get to them quicker. And as an owner of a company, that might not be easy. So we recognize that might not be easy. And
that should be part of your strategy of when you post. And so one of the things that drove me nuts is we posted a position and the person was on vacation for a week. Well, we should have waited a week before posting it because of that turnaround. And so you want to be cognizant about when you post, where you're posting, and how quickly that you are able to. And I recommend that if you have a lot of openings, that you are carving time out of your day to say, that is my applicant time.
Yeah.
We're asking our managers to hold on their calendars applicant time, so that if we get an applicant, we can say, my manager's available at 1. Are you available at 1 today? Or, getting them on that calendar as quickly as possible. And so if you have lots of hires, my recommendation is both you as the recruiter and your managers are blocking daily time in order to reach out to candidates.
Yeah, that's a really good recommendation. Very, very valid. I think
it's hard to get to.
Yeah, I'm sure. Especially with everyone so busy. And, we're going to talk a little bit about this theory that maybe the talent of war will end someday. But before we go there, it's really, really valid question from Lillian. It's very, very timely because it just happened to hit right when the slide changed. And it said, any tips on finding qualified applicants in today's current market? It's a hard market, right? And any magic you guys have found that's worth sharing with everyone?
I wish I had magic pieces. There really isn't that magic piece. I think that, as you're going out, where are you advertising? How are people finding you? Is it a job that you're looking across the national? If you're looking for, dietary and housekeeping, they're not going to come from national. So where are you setting up tents? How are you doing your hiring events? So we have a hiring event coming up we're very excited about. It's like a home-a-rama. We're calling it a hire-a-rama. And so we're creating a home type feel for people to come in, walk in, and where we can do offers on the spot, where if they don't have an application, they can sit down, do an application, meet with the manager, and get into the organization. So I think that you have to rethink how you're getting folks into the organization, flyers, billboards, things that are local. Mailing doesn't work, emails sometimes work, but visuals are probably the biggest impact of how are you visualizing your job openings within your community and where you're living and working.
Yeah, it's really valid. I'm gonna go back to one thing you said earlier, Debbie, that I think I would add to that, and it's connection, right? Is people are more likely to get involved with things they care about. And so Lillian, you might think about that a little bit. I know from a marketing angle, that's what we do, is we try to connect people. I mean, Verified First, we're a background screening company, right? It's pretty simple, boring, but the reality is we try to keep good people safe, and that's what I care about, is because I have kids and they work in the community. I want to make sure, their organizations aren't hiring someone that puts them at risk or, puts the organization they work for at risk or whatever. But I think it's really about connection too, is make sure you communicate who you are and what you stand for and find people that care about that, quite frankly.
Well, and I would say your current employees are your best resource. Your
Sure.
current employees, if you offer, and it doesn't have to be much, it might be a monthly drawing for those that are referring candidates to your organization. But if you ask them for referrals, you make sure that you interview those referrals, whether it's a courtesy interview or whether it's not. You want to make sure that you give that person where if they made that referral, that person that they're referring gets at least a touch, because that's the respectful thing to do. And your staff will be very respectful back in giving people a recommendation. There's nothing worse than your staff recommending somebody and nobody contacting them.
Yeah.
So, but your staff are a wealth of information, their Facebook accounts, their Twitter accounts, their TikToks. They will go out and do that, especially if there's a reward potentially at the end. And those are good referrals.
Yeah, that's a really good point. In talent market of today, everyone's either working or, people are throwing more money at people. But if you have a friend at the organization, they love where they work, right? Yeah, you're right. That's good recommendation. Well, good stuff. So I know we're coming up on our end. We only have a few more minutes, and I wish we had another hour. I think we could talk about kind of getting stability back in our lives. None of us knows what this looks like, right? COVID has thrown us all these weird curves. We don't know what the new normal. Maybe we are normal now, for all we know, right? As you think about kind of falling back to a normal, do you think that's really a thing, or do you think maybe we move forward and really think about the candidate experience and getting rid of old, rigid strategies that might not have worked? What's your thoughts there, Debbie?
I think that we do need to get rid of some of the rigid strategies of what we've created. And what I mean by that is if I was walking through our applicant process, and it seems so onerous to get in the door. And so I do think that as an organization, looking at what your options are out there, technology is great. You're seeing some of the new technology around. Instead of an application, the person does a video interview that the manager can actually watch versus going through a resume, where they're asked some specific questions, they're able to record the interview, and then the manager, instead of going through a resume, is looking at the video interview. I think those types of technologies are here to stay. I think that we need to utilize them more. I think they are more effective. And so I think that we do need to change our processes, and we need to focus at it from the applicant experience. What is the applicant feeling? How are we meeting them where they are? How are we being agile to meet their needs versus making them jump through hoops for our needs? So I think it's a combination. I think we're somewhere where we're never going to go back to that in-person sitting down doing multiple interviews. I think it's going to be more video conferencing, more video interviews, more interactions along the way.
Yeah, that's good feedback. And I think, it's kind of relevant to Michaela's question. She just posted a question. Company hires drivers, they get hundreds of applicants. They have a hard time getting people that go from the onboarding to the working phase. And Michaela, my recommendation kind of echoes a little bit what Debbie just said, is maybe go through that process yourself and identify what you don't like about it, and think about maybe that onboarding to working process, maybe something there isn't applicant experience friendly. I don't know, but that would be a recommendation. But
and I will say, from an applicant standpoint, one of my biggest pet peeves is when you see a job posting that's been out there for 6 months. Did you actually go through all of the applicants? And once we get a certain number of applicants, we'll take that offline and work through those applicants versus just getting more and more applicants. That buries your recruiter. You can always turn it back on if you don't have the applicants that you're looking for. But we sometimes will take a position off after only a day if we have adequate applicants in order to sift through. And so instead of keeping that ad up for a week and getting 700 applicants, which I don't think anybody's doing that for any job, but going through those applicants, when we get to a certain level, we kind of flip the spigot off to get through the applicants that we have. And then the other thing that I'm saying, or that I recommend, is that when you're looking at those applicants, don't just look at the applicant for the job they applied for, but you need to be aware of all of the positions in your organization and be able to turf those folks to other positions. Because if they're interested in your organization and they applied for this position, maybe they don't fit that position, but they might be eligible for another position. And recycling those applicants, when we got to that point, we started doubling our orientations, because it's not just what they applied for, it's what we looked at for talent for them, and then moving them to the jobs that they are qualified for.
It's really good feedback. Again, I know we could probably talk for hours and hours, right? Hopefully this is found valuable for all of our audience. Debbie, I know we're at the end of our time. I just want to thank you for all the good insight. For those listening, feel free, and you too, Debbie, and anyone on your team. We are talking with Rapti from the NFL next month at our HR at the Table, episode 11, and kind of related to the war on talent coming up in January. We actually are interviewing Min Hua, who Min is the head of HR at Stanley Black & Decker, previous head of HR at Amazon Web Services, JP Morgan, and many others. So it's going to be really good. Make sure you tune in, and he's going to talk about the David versus Goliath. So you're a smaller organization trying to fight this talent war, he's going to give you some tips to win. So anyway, looking forward to our sessions together. Debbie, again, thank you so much. Your contact information here is on the page. We definitely want to shout out one more time Workable. Thanks for sponsoring today's HR at the Table. And we're really excited, and thank you for all your wisdom, Debbie, all the knowledge, and taking the time out of the day to share with us. I'm sure this is very valuable time for you, so I can't thank you enough for that time. And with that, I'm going to sign out. I think there's one last note from our initial moderator, and how you can get your Sherman HRCI credit, I think.
Yes, well, that about wraps it up for today's discussion. I want to thank everyone for your attendance today, as it is always important to learn how to define agility for HR and TA professionals. I'd also like to give a big thank you to our hosts, Ben Cornett and Debbie Rosenberg, for having this great and relevant discussion. We'd love to hear what you thought about our webinar today, so make sure to leave us some feedback on our post-webinar survey. For our live attendees today, stick around just a little longer for our post-webinar survey to redeem one SHRM and/or HRCI credit. For any on-demand listeners, check your email for instructions on how to redeem your credit. We'll be sending out the webinar on demand in case you want to use this for a reference or send it to a colleague. Also, stay tuned for more HR at the Table webinars and for blogs deep diving into today's topic. Next, we will be hosting the National Football League's VP and Head of Talent and Engagement Development. We hope you can make it, and we'll see you all next time.